Okay, thank you, everybody. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have an apology from Councillor Panter and Councillor Hutton is substitute, and an apology from Councillor Diamond.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest from any of the members? No, thank you. Okay. Item number 3 then, the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments in relation to these, or any errors or omissions? No? Thank you. I'll take that as being correct then. Item number 4 then, the external audit certification work. We should have, yes, he's there. Andrew Smith from Grant Thornton is going to run through that. Sorry, I didn't see you. You're just down in the corner there, Andrew. Would you like to give us a run through your report, please, Andrew?
Yes, that's fine, Chair. Sorry, just to clarify, the agenda item says certification report. This is actually our audit plan, just to kind of for the minutes. But in terms of the key headlines, if I can take you to page 10 and page 4 of the report, that just summarises the key headlines in our audit plan. This plan is on the back of the planning work which we've now completed for the 2021 audit, and we're now obviously now readying ourselves for the year-end audit, which will start in July this year. In terms of the kind of significant risks, they are the same as they have been in previous years. So we have the presumed risk around management override of control, which auditing standards require us to assess. We also have the significant risk around the valuation of the council's land and buildings and investment properties, and also the valuation of the council's pension fund liability. So obviously we will be doing a significant amount of work, as we have done in recent years around these areas, and we'll obviously report back to the audit committee in due course. In terms of materiality, just for absolute clarity for members, materiality is essentially the level of error that we work to when we're performing the audit. Errors above our materiality level effectively would impact on our opinion. So if we found an error that was in excess of materiality, we would qualify our opinion to the council's accounts. So that level has been set at 1.15 million. That is ever so slightly lower than it was in the prior year, albeit we will reassess that materiality level once we receive the draft accounts in a few months' time. We will also report to the audit committee errors at a low level. So anything that we find in excess of £57,000, we will report back in our audit findings report to the audit committee in due course. In terms of value for money, you may be aware from previous meetings that the NEO has changed the requirements this year for the value for money work, and they've actually widened the scope of the work that we need to do around value for money this year. So now, rather than work on a risk-based exception basis as we have in the past, we now have to provide commentary and assessment across 15 key lines of inquiry. So we will be doing that work in order to provide that commentary in our auditor report, which will arrive later in the year. As part of our planning work, we have identified one potential area of significant weakness, which remains around the council's financial sustainability. So we will be doing some additional risk-based work around that, but we will be doing additional work as well to provide commentary across the other key criteria as well. In addition to that, I should have, just in terms of the accounts, there is also a change in scope this year around accounting estimates. Auditing standards have changed, and there is some additional work that we need to do in terms of assessing the estimates, and we are working with management in terms of what they need to do. It will mean that the audit committee will need to provide more oversight over the way management prepare the accounting estimates, and I believe a report may be coming back to the audit committee at the next meeting when the draft accounts are presented around some of the significant estimates in the accounts. So there is some additional work that we're required to do around that this year as well. In terms of logistics, as I say, our planning work is now complete and we're now ready for the start of the year-end visit, which will start in July. And we are intending at the moment to conclude the audit and report back to the audit committee by September. Just for absolute clarity, what that means is that we will present our audit findings report on the accounts in September. The NEO has just released some guidance at the back end of last week, which has said that the auditor annual report can arrive at a later date. The auditor annual report is slightly different from what you've had in the past, in that that will include the commentary on value for money, and that can arrive up to 3 months later now than the audit findings report. So that may well be received by the committee later in the calendar year. In terms of fees, there has been an increase in fee from the prior year, and that is largely down to the changes that I've mentioned before around value for money, and also the change in auditing standards, where in both areas additional work is required. So there has been an increase in fee. The good news for the council is we do understand that CLG are going to provide funding to audited bodies to offset the cost of fees increases for the changes around value for money and auditing standards. So whilst our fee has increased, hopefully that will be largely offset by the funding that CLG will provide to the council. We've not seen any further details in terms of how much will be allocated to each council, but we do understand that it will largely offset any increase that you're proposing. So hopefully it will be largely cost neutral to the authority. And then the final thing I just wanted to mention is obviously we are required to be independent as your auditor, and we can confirm that we are. There is one piece of non-audit work that I just need to report to the audit committee, which is the housing benefits certification work that we do each year, and that's reported later on in the report. So they are the key headlines in our audit plan for the coming year. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Do any members have any questions? Mike?
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick one, Andrew, and I think you've probably answered most of it. So is it the 18,000, which is the increase? So on page 18, the additional work on value for money and the increased audit requirements, are those the two items that may well be offset against any government funding?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Do you have any other questions from anybody? No? Well, thanks very much, Andrew. We'll move on. Cheers. Item number 5 then, the corporate risk policy and strategy. And Simon Sowerby is going to run through this for us. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5 looks at the corporate risk policy and strategy 2021 to 22. And basically it's an annual review. So there's 2 minor changes. The first change is around the dates. Date changes within the risk management policy. The second point is some minor amendments at point 3 on the updated accounts and audit statement. And those changes appear on page 39 of the pack, or page 5 of the actual audit accounts and audit statement. And it's basically adding the word England in brackets and a date of 2015. There is a further change which adds another paragraph, just explaining the financial monitoring. The next stage is if scrutiny are happy with the reports, this goes to both leader and CEO for sign-off and publication.
Thanks, Simon.
Are there any questions?
No, there's no questions. Thanks, Simon. We can all note that we've received this, and we'll move on to item number 6, page 75, the corporate risk management report follow-up. Members will remember we asked for more detail on how the risks are arrived at in the previous meeting, and we selected a number of areas, and Simon's just going to run through those areas for us to give us a bit more detail and explain how this is actually done. And I think we're probably best looking at this as a training scenario, because obviously that's what it's primarily for. So over to you, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and share my screen with you. So can everyone see that?
Yeah. Well, I can.
Okay.
Yes.
So this was one of the first risks you asked us to feed back to you on. So the report, the officer report, looks at the proposal at paragraph 3, 3.1, and there's a number of bullet points there on the summary, the process of actually undertaking the risk audit per se. So really, I wanted to take you through the air quality element of the risk audit. So you'll see from this document, the first measure is to come up with a description of the risk, which is highlighted there. And this is done by normally the client officer, either the head of service or the responsible officer from the service area, operationally or corporately from an EMT member. Having developed the risk description, we then come on to the possible consequences of the risk itself, the risk description, which are listed there. So there's in this particular risk, the Shaku buzz retrofit, there's potentially 5 consequences linked to the risk description. We then come to look at the implications based on the above 2, and you'll see there that there's 3 implications linked to this particular risk. From there, we then assess, and this is coming back to your report now. If you look at page 76 in your report, and it's the second bullet point down, we begin to look at the impacts. So the impact measures, the likelihood measures, and it's the 3 coloured tables in that particular report. And from that, we develop a risk score. So having then developed a risk score, we identify the risk owner, which in this case is Nesta Barker, as you can see. The risk score from the above, having assessed the impacts, the likelihood, is an amber 3. What that team then actually does, what Nesta will do with their own team and with either the responsible officer for risk or the risk champion for that particular area, is they will discuss the key control measures they either have in place or can potentially put in place. So you can see the key control measures there listed. So there's 9 key control measures that the officers have identified and put in place to begin to manage and control this particular risk. So having put the key control measures in place, they then reassess the risks based on the impact measures, based on the likelihood, and they come up with a final risk rating, which you'll see hasn't changed in this case, and is an amber 3. They've then got the opportunity to establish any potential future control measures and set up possibly action plans to introduce those. And you'll see that as part of any risk report, if there is an action plan, it's reported in this particular section here. Now that approach will be adopted for all the 3 risks under the air quality. So this is the second of the 3 risks under air quality, and this is the North Staff's local air quality plan. Again, there's a description, there's a potential consequence, there's the implications, there's the initial risk rating at 9, and then you'll see the control measures that the officers have put in place or intend to put in place following the discussions that they've had, which then brings the final risk rating down to a medium amber 6. And again, you'll see a number of action plans in place There's 3 action plans in place there. And then finally, local air quality, same approach again, risk description, potential consequences, any implications. They've not identified any implications in this case. Having assessed those, they've come up with an initial risk rating of an amber 3 and a final risk rating of a medium amber 3. And again, they've developed those control measures to bring the final risk rating either down or sustain it at an amber 3. You'll also note that there's a treatment element where we either tolerate in this case, or we treat in this case. And in the first case, again, you'll find it's tolerate. Again, there's a definition of all of these, the tolerate, the treat, and you'll find those in the documents that we're about to publish or have published on an annual basis for review. So all of this information is in those documents. So that's the information around the air quality risks. And I guess I'll pause there to see if there's any questions from members at this point before moving on to the second element, which is the financial risk. Any questions?
I can't actually see the members, Simon, but if anybody's got any questions, if you would like to just shout out. No, it looks like we don't have any questions for that, thanks.
Okay, so the second area you asked us to look at was the financial risk. So the financial risk is a corporate risk register. But that said, there's various departments that also have their own operational risk registers with final risks being identified and dealt with at that particular level. But overall, finance is a corporate risk for the whole of the council and has its own set of controls and further actions, which is similar to the process that I've just described. In Appendix B that we supplied you, we give you the structure behind the financial risk elements. So it sits under resources and support services. It drops down to finance. And under finance, we've identified 13 risks. Each one of those 13 risks will have a risk description, the potential consequences, the implications, an owner, an initial rating, key control measures established, and a final risk rating decided. And again, any action plans to support that. But there's also other areas such as operational areas like commercial development. And if you've gone through the report, you'll note that the services identified a financial risk of not achieving income targets, which will impact on the financial risk as a total. Sarah, I don't know whether you want to come in on that and mention any areas I may have missed around financial risk.
Yeah, no, totally agree. So, for example, we just picked up on the commercial development area. As we talked about when we had the budget approved at council, that some of the commercial activity work that we planned to do because of COVID had been slightly paused, and that we'll be picking that up again, or looking at that again now, moving forward. But that was something that we adjusted the MTFS for, obviously with the income that we originally planned, expected to come in, that you know we anticipated that wasn't going to happen, so we adjusted for that. So again, that risk around that would have been changed to reflect the circumstances that we were reviewing things. So it's all these risks are continually monitored and reviewed on a monthly basis, depending on how high the risk is, and a bi-monthly basis sometimes, depending on the lower risk areas, and if it is something that we can just roll forward. So yeah, I mean, loss of income, resource levels, suppliers, loss of the financial ledger system, all these things that we rely on a day-to-day basis to be able to provide the service that we provide and make sure that all the council's finances are there for the services. It's all held within the grace system, and there's a risk for all of those elements. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Sarah.
So at that point, Chair, I'll ask if there's any questions on the financial element of the presentation and report.
Anybody have any questions? No, I'm not hearing anybody, Simon. You're on the roll.
So that brings us to the final area, which was the workforce risk. So around the workforce risk, each service and directorate may have identified risk related to their own workforce and manage them accordingly. There is a corporate risk which relates to the issues of the whole of the council, which is currently rated as a number 5. Again, going through the elements that we've just gone through. And following the identification of appropriate control measures. And there's also an action plan developed there where we're looking to develop the workforce strategy and development plan to support in the mitigation of risks, the control and mitigation of risks around the workforce area. As for individual services, the officer's report has provided an example of the environmental health to identify 3 particular risks relating to their own localised service. And you'll have noticed that these are failure to provide environmental health admin support, failing to provide competent officers environmental health, and third, over-reliance on key officers. Again, throughout the council, services similar risks have been identified and assessed accordingly. So each service area may have its own relevant workforce risks and will have gone through all of these control to rate the risks, to assess the control measures they have in place, and to come up with a final risk score. Just to say, where there's a major problem identified, there is the escalation process, and the escalation process is up into EMT. The officer reports further identifies as a workforce as again a corporate risk, all service risks have been collated to a corporate risk for EMT to manage accordingly. Corporate risk further actions will address the higher level and disseminate down to us to assist departments where possible to protect and support the current employees and strengthen the recruitment. So again, there's a structured approach in regards to the assessment of localized risks and corporate risks around the workforce development and control. Again, Chair, happy to open up the report to any questions.
Do we have any questions, anyone? Simon, can you just take the screen share down? Because I can't see most people at the moment.
Sorry.
I'm not seeing any hands up or anything. So, oh, sorry, Graham, you're muted. You're still muted.
Chair, if it assists, I think Councillor Hutton's having some audio problems, but he's popped a question in the chat earlier on. Did I just hear him there? No. He's popped a question in the chat earlier on, which you can all see, and I can, if this is what he's trying to indicate, it says in air quality, is this just traffic or is the landfill included? So that's a specific question on the air quality risk measure that we've just been discussing.
I believe it's just the traffic at this point. Having reviewed the risk, I can't see any comments about landfill in the risk report.
And I think the The other thing I'd point out, Chair, is that this is a presentation more around how risk management is done. So I don't think we have an officer on the line who's able to take any technical questions on the content of that risk assessment. So it's more for format for tonight's purposes, I think.
Yeah.
But I'll put myself back on mute now, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I can't see anybody else asking any questions, so thanks very much for the presentation, Simon, and I hope that now that will have improved members' insight into how the risk management process is followed. So thanks very much again.
Thank you, Chair.
If we would like to move on then, item number 7 then is the counter fraud arrangements, and Sarah's going to give us some detail on that, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the suite of reports that refers to the counter fraud arrangements which we present to Audit and Standards Committee each year. I think last year we brought this suite of reports to the committee in July. That was because of the delay, because of COVID. Was sort of just starting then. So these reports are probably quite familiar to you. You've probably seen them a number of times. There's not a great deal of change to these reports. There's just a reference to the update on the Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Amendment Regulation of 2019, which came into force on the 10th of January 2020. Predominantly the regulation is just an amendment from the regulation that came into force back in June 2017 and remains undisturbed, really. All the content is predominantly the same as it was previously. I think it's perhaps worth noting that we've been doing some corporate fraud e-learning awareness across the council. So each member of staff has had access to some online fraud awareness e-learning, and I think there's around about half the staff in the council completed the fraud awareness e-learning at present. In addition, the corporate fraud officer retired at the end of March, and part of the work that he was doing, he was working with the Stoke Fraud Hub. So we're continuing to use the Stoke Fraud Hub services, and as we have been for the last sort of couple of years. So we're still using that arrangement for any potential fraud issues that may arise moving forward. As I say, that no major amendments on the policies, but happy to take any questions if anybody's got any questions at all.
Thank you, Sarah. Does anybody have any questions? Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, Sarah, from a point of view, you mentioned around half, say, of the staff had taken the online course. I mean, I only talk from personal experience. In the organisation I work, everybody has to do it as a mandatory course. Is there scope, I mean, not to perhaps bring that in going forward? I know it would be incredibly difficult to get half the council, especially in the current climate, to sit down and do a course, but I think we all need to be engaged in that rather than just maybe the white collar work, because everybody needs to be at least aware of the fraud prevention. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, we are still rolling the fraud e-learning out at the moment, the training out. Hayley Ashmore is monitoring who sort of actually completed the fraud e-learning training at the moment, and chasing people up on a weekly basis, just reminding them that, you know, you've had a link and this is the training that you're required to complete. So yeah, it's still ongoing, and we intend to have everybody complete it eventually. But yeah, it's still ongoing.
Thank you, sir.
Is this something, Sarah, that could be rolled out to the members, do you think? Is it? I mean, I've no idea how long the training takes or whatever, but obviously we do like to encourage members to get training on any relevant things, and obviously something like this is well, it's a major issue at the moment, isn't it? We're constantly hearing about people getting into trouble and having money stolen and all sorts of things like that. And it may just be that it's something that could be rolled out to all the members. I suppose it'd have to be done online or whatever, because we're not in a position where we can just get all the members in for, you know, a training course at the moment. But I'd be grateful if you could have a look at that and let us know what potential there is to actually do that, and then we could make all the members aware of its availability.
Yeah, no problem. So it'd be quite easy for us to roll it out to members. It is an online training course, and it probably only take you sort of 30 minutes to an hour to complete. Quite very sort of straightforward to sort of use, very informational, and yeah, certainly I can look into rolling that out to members. No problem.
If you could, I mean, I don't think it ever hurts to learn something about these things, and even, you know, even if it only means that we're able to answer more fully questions that people may ask us just generally, you know, it may help. So thank you for that. Right, so moving on, item number 8 is the internal audit plan for 2021-22, and Claire's here to give us some more detail on that, if you wouldn't mind, Claire, please. Claire is frozen.
Claire's frozen. Very stern looking Claire.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking, I thought she doesn't seem to be smiling much. Yeah. I don't know whether there's anything we can do about that just at the moment.
I expect she's in the process of dialing back in, Chair, so give her a little minute.
Yeah, we'll just give her a minute to look at. While we're waiting for Claire to come back, I'll just briefly move on to the work plan. And the reason why I'm sort of picking this up now is that we've had a look at the work plan and we only have one item for the next meeting, which was due on the 28th of June, I believe. And this is primarily because of COVID and so on, how it's altered the dates that things are due to be completed and so on. And so what we're actually proposing is that we move that one item to the meeting, which is, I believe, the 26th of July. Was that correct, Dan? The 26th of July?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Right. So as long as nobody has any objections, we'll move that item on the Code of Corporate Governance to the meeting of the 26th of July. And we'll dispense with the meeting on the 28th of August, 28th of June, sorry. Right. I still can't see Claire.
No, Chair, she's not appearing in the panellists list at the moment. So I think, like Dan said, she's left and is trying to join back again. So do we want to wait a few minutes for?
We'll give her a couple of minutes.
Yeah, could I just going back to the work plan, July, as Andrew from Grant Thornton stated earlier, that there's we'll be doing an estimates report relating to year end. So obviously the external audit work will be looking more into the estimates that we've made around valuations, etc., particularly due to COVID. So there will be a report that we'll be producing around that. So that'll be something that we'll add on to the work plan for the July meeting to be reviewed.
That's fine.
Claire's back.
Welcome back, Claire.
Sorry about that. Always happens at opportune times, doesn't it?
I thought you've done a runner. So right, well, when you're ready, if you'd like to just give us a run through the internal audit plan, please.
Yeah, no problem, Chair. So this is the annual audit plan for the current financial year, so covering April 21 up to March 22, and it is based on a risk-based approach. So we do a full risk assessment before we produce the plan. The plan is on page 141 of your pack. Also, just to say, we have an internal audit charter that we produce each year, and public sector internal audit standards say that we should have that charter in place. And what that charter does, it sets out how we go about doing our work, how we sort of access premises, how we look at your data, things like that. So obviously it's important that we make sure we've got that in place, and we do review that every year. And that's also attached for the committee's information, and that's in the pack on page 143. We have reviewed it this time, and there's been minimal changes, mostly around job titles and things like that. Paragraph 2.4 of the report just highlights how we conduct that risk assessment. Sorry, just have a question, sorry.
No, I don't.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can still.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so paragraph 2.4 of the report just highlights how we conduct that risk assessment. And it's based on the council's objectives. So it's risks around achievement of the council's objectives. So the kind of things that we do in that risk assessment is we look at emerging issues, so locally and nationally. Obviously, the big thing for us this year when we produced our plan was around making sure the audits we weren't able to undertake during the previous financial year, mainly due to the pandemic, are picked up as a matter of urgency this year. So that's been our priority, really, making sure that we factor in doing those audits that we weren't able to conduct last year. But alongside that, we've also done some revised our risk assessment. So we've talked to directors to ask them for their input into the plan. And what we'll do is we'll do another risk assessment for each of those items on the plan as part of conducting each of those pieces of audit work. So there's another step in terms of doing that risk-based assessment to make sure that when we come to do the audit at that point in time, we revise that risk assessment to make sure we're looking at the right things when we conduct that audit. So then there's obviously an extra opportunity for directors and heads of service to tell us what the key risks are at the point that we conduct the audit. So obviously things change, don't they, throughout the year. So as I mentioned already, the work plan is Appendix 1 on page 141. Just to draw your attention to the top part of that plan is around key financial systems. And as you'll notice, the days that we put aside to do those pieces of work are actually quite a small number of days. And the reason for that is because we conduct health check audits. So basically where we've got an area that's, we've previously looked at it and it's well controlled or adequately controlled, we do a smaller piece of work in that area, just basically to make sure we're being as efficient as we can with our time. I just also wanted to mention around the IT audits. As you'll notice, what we've said in there is that we'll conduct a needs assessment for the IT audit work that we do this year. You've recently had a new head of IT, so we've had conversations with them about what the plan might look like over the next 3 years. Obviously, massive changes in terms of IT with the pandemic and people are moving to sort of home working, and so the IT landscape has completely changed. So what we wanted to do was build some time at the front end of the plan this year to do a revised assessment of what audits we need to conduct, say in conjunction with your new head of IT. So what we've done there is put some time aside to do that needs-based assessment, and then what we'll do is we'll conduct IT audits as part of the work we do this year on that. Don't think there's anything else particularly I wanted to highlight in terms of detail in the report, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
No questions.
I can't see any hands up. So no, I think that's fine. Thank you, Claire.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I lost the connection there.
Yeah, it's all right. It can't be helped. As a committee, we need to first of all approve the internal audit plan. So is everybody happy to approve that plan? Yeah. Okay. And secondly, we need to also approve the internal audit charter. Is everybody happy to approve the internal audit charter?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we need to agree to receive quarterly reports and updates on the work of the audit committee and the work of the internal audit department. We're happy to agree that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. I think we've dealt with the work plan. Does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, Chair, can I come back to the work plan?
Sure, yeah.
We mentioned at the last meeting with regard to the audit of the systems with regard to the COVID within Newcastle. with the 21st of June being the stage 4 of the roadmap out of lockdown, can we start thinking about putting that in place, please?
Yeah, I mean, what we could do is we could ask the officers to see where I mean, we've had so many false starts with COVID, believing that it was over and we were getting somewhere. And I'll speak to the officers and see at what point we think that it's feasible for us to actually do some work on this and present a report to the committee so that we actually get something meaningful. But yes, I agree with you. We did say that we were going to look at this and we were going to come back with a report at some point in time once we felt we were actually at maybe a plateau, should we say, where things weren't changing as quickly as they have been doing. So yeah, I'll speak to the officers and we'll see at what point in time it's feasible to do that. And obviously, I take your point that we reached stage 4 in June. So if there's something that we're able to bring back in July, then
Sure, I wouldn't expect it in a month. But even if we got a plan together for the next meeting after June, so was it August? Even if we just see a plan of what we're going to do, I absolutely happy to leave it with you, Chair. No problem at all. But even if we've got a plan of action for the August meeting.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll have a look at that and see where we're going to go with it, because obviously the officers will have to look at the scope of it and all manner of things, I suppose. So it's quite a big exercise, something like that.
27th of September, Chair. There's no August meeting.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't want to kick you too far down the road, Chair. So if we can be ready to push the button in the September meeting.
Okay, we'll have a look at that then.
Thank you.
All right. I've not been advised of any items of urgent business, and unless Dan's going to tell me to the contrary, that basically concludes the business of the committee. So thank you all for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you in July. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Night.
Night all.
Night.